The day I caught my sister consoling my husband about my barrenness was the day my world shattered into a million razor-sharp pieces. I stood frozen in our hallway, my hands still gripping the shopping bags I'd brought home early from my grocery run, listening to their voices drift from our kitchen. My name is Grace, and until that moment, I thought I had a perfect life. A loving husband of 5 years, a close relationship with my younger sister, and a beautiful home in the suburbs of Boston. The only cloud in our sky was our struggle to conceive, but Gerald and I were working through it together. Or so I thought. "It's not your fault," Violet's voice cooed. "You've done everything you could. Grace is the one who can't give you what you want." The shopping bag slipped from my fingers, but I caught them before they hit the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs as I inched closer to the kitchen doorway. Gerald's voice cracked. "I want a family so badly, Vi. Every time I see a father with his kids at the park, it kills me inside." "I know, sweetie. I know." The tenderness in my sister's voice made me sick. "Have you considered other options?" "What do you mean?" "Well," Violet paused. "The doctors confirmed it's Grace's problem, right? Maybe it's time to think about moving on. Finding someone who can give you the family you deserve." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. I waited for Gerald to defend me, to shut down this conversation, to tell my sister she was out of line. Instead, I heard him sigh. "I can't do that to Grace. But she's doing it to you." Violet's voice rose with fake concern. "She's stealing your chance at happiness, at having children. Every day you stay with her is another day you're losing." I backed away from the doorway, my vision blurring. The shopping bags finally dropped, sending oranges rolling across the hardwood floor. The conversation in the kitchen stopped abruptly. "Grace," Gerald called out. "Is that you?" I couldn't face them. Not yet. I turned and ran out the front door, ignoring their calls behind me. I drove to the only place I could think of, Irene's house. My best friend took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "What happened?" I collapsed onto her couch, the words spilling out between sobs. "They're plotting against me, Irene. My own sister, my husband." "Slow down." Irene sat beside me, holding my hands. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the fertility treatments, about how each negative pregnancy test felt like a knife in my heart, about how Gerald had grown distant over the past few months, and how Violet had been spending more time at our house, always there to support us through our struggles. "Something's not right," Irene said after I finished. "Have you seen these medical reports yourself? The ones saying you're the problem?" I shook my head. "Gerald always handles the medical stuff. He says it stresses me out too much. Call your doctor's office." "Now." Irene handed me her phone. "Request copies of everything." My hands shook as I dialed the number. 10 minutes later, I hung up, my face pale. "What is it?" Irene asked. They said they never ran those tests on me. The ones Gerald showed me, they don't exist in their records." Irene's expression hardened. "Grace, I think you need to do some digging. This doesn't add up." Later that evening, I forced myself to return home. Gerald was waiting in the living room, pacing. "Where have you been?" I was worried sick. He rushed to hug me, but I stepped back. "I needed some air," I said, watching his face carefully. "After dropping those groceries." He relaxed slightly. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." I met his eyes. "Where's Violet?" "She left." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Grace, she was just trying to help." "Help who, Gerald?" My voice was eerily calm. "You? Or herself?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of the screen, Violet's name, with a heart emoji next to it. Gerald quickly turned the phone face down. "I'm tired," I said, heading toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Gerald slept beside me. Through our bedroom window, I watched his car pull out of our driveway at 2 a.m. 20 minutes later, I drove past Violet's apartment building. Gerald's car was parked outside. Sometimes, the most painful truths come in the dead of night, when the world is quiet enough to hear your heart breaking. But as I drove home alone, something else stirred inside me, something harder and colder than heartbreak. something that whispered of justice. The next morning, I called in sick to work and waited for Gerald to leave. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I began my search. Our home office held 5 years of memories and secrets. "Come on," I muttered, rifling through Gerald's desk drawers. "Where are those medical reports?" The bottom drawer was locked. I remembered the spare key Gerald kept taped under his desk, a habit from his forgetful college days. My hands trembled as I retrieved it. Inside, I found a manila folder labeled Fertility Clinic. The documents looked official at first glance, but something felt off. I snapped photos and texted them to Irene. My phone rang almost immediately. "Grace, look at the letterhead," Irene said without greeting. "The clinic's address is wrong." I just checked their website. "What?" "And the doctor's signature. Dr. Harrison retired 2 years ago." "These are fake." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. How would Gerald even? "Wait," Irene cut in. "Doesn't Violet work at a printing company?" The pieces clicked into place. I remembered Violet bragging about her graphic design skills, about how she could replicate any document perfectly. At the time, I thought she was just proud of her work. My phone buzzed with another call. "Gerald." I declined it and texted, "Working through lunch. Talk later." I dug deeper into the drawer and found a small notebook. Inside were dates, times, and locations, all meetings between Gerald and Violet going back months. Some entries had little hearts drawn next to them. "Irene," I choked out. "I need you to come over." "Now." She arrived 15 minutes later with coffee and determination. "We're getting to the bottom of this today." We spent the next hour documenting everything. The fake medical reports, the secret meetings, the suspicious bank transfers to Violet's account labeled consulting fees. "Look at this," Irene pointed to a receipt. Gerald had his own fertility tests done at a different clinic 3 months ago. I called the clinic, putting on my best professional voice. "Hi, this is Dr. Walker's office. We need to verify some test results for Gerald. There seems to be a discrepancy in our records." The receptionist was helpful, too helpful. "Oh yes, poor Mr. Gerald. Such a difficult diagnosis. Complete azoospermia. He'll never be able to father children naturally. Did he not follow up with a genetic counselor as recommended?" My hand covered my mouth to stifle a gasp. Irene grabbed the phone. "Thank you, that's all we needed." She hung up and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Grace." "It was never me," I whispered. "He's the one who can't," and they made me think. A key turned in the front door. Gerald was home early. "Quick," I hissed, shoving everything back into the drawer. We barely made it to the kitchen when Gerald walked in. He stopped short at the sight of Irene. "What's going on?" His eyes darted between us. "Girls' lunch," Irene said smoothly. "Grace needed company since you've been so busy lately." Gerald's phone chimed. He checked it, and I caught that familiar flash of guilt in his eyes. I need to handle something at work," he said. "Don't wait up for dinner." After he left, Irene grabbed my shoulders. "You need a lawyer." "Now." "I know someone," I said quietly. "Jeremy from college. He specializes in family law." Jeremy agreed to meet us that afternoon. In his downtown office, I laid out everything we'd found. "This is substantial," Jeremy said, reviewing the evidence. "The forged medical documents alone are criminal. But Grace, there's something else you should know." He pulled up a legal document on his computer. "Your husband had a trust fund that would only activate when he had his first child. Significant money, we're talking millions. So that's why." The pieces kept falling into place. "They needed you to think you were the problem," Irene said. "So you'd step aside voluntarily." Jeremy leaned forward. "Grace, you have options. We can file for divorce immediately, expose everything." "No," I said, an idea forming. "Not yet. I need you to help me with something else first." "What do you have in mind?" I took a deep breath. "Remember those eggs I froze 3 years ago, before my cancer scare? I want to know if they're still viable." Jeremy's eyes widened. "Grace. And I want to know my legal rights regarding Gerald's stored sperm samples from our IVF attempts." Irene grabbed my hand. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" I nodded slowly. They wanted to take everything from me, my marriage, my chance at motherhood, my dignity. But they made one mistake. What's that? Jeremy asked. They underestimated how far I'd go to get justice. I straightened in my chair. So, Jeremy, can you help me? He smiled grimly. Let's talk strategy. Your eggs are perfectly viable, Dr. Chen confirmed, reviewing my medical records. And since you and Gerald signed joint ownership forms for all fertility treatments, you have equal rights to the stored genetic material. I sat in her office a week later, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. And the chances of success? With your age and health, very good. But Grace, she leaned forward. Are you sure about this? Having a child is a lifetime commitment, not a revenge plot? I finished. Trust me, Dr. Chen, I've wanted to be a mother my entire life. They tried to steal that from me. She nodded slowly. We'll need to do some preliminary tests first. As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. Gerald's message read, working late again. Don't wait up. I typed back a simple okay and called Jeremy. Everything's set, he said. I've documented all the legal permissions. They can't stop you, even if they find out. They won't, I replied. Not until it's too late. That evening, Irene came over with takeout and wine. We sat on my back porch, watching the sunset. I saw Violet today, Irene said carefully. At the mall. She was shopping for wedding dresses. The wine glass froze halfway to my lips. Already? Apparently, they're planning a spring wedding. 6 months from now. I set down my glass. Perfect timing. Grace, Irene touched my arm. Are you absolutely sure about this? Having a baby, it's not something you can undo. I had my first IVF consultation this morning, I said. Dr. Chen thinks we could start the process next week. We? You mean? I've asked her to be discreet. As far as anyone knows, I'm just a single woman using a sperm donor. I managed a small smile. Technically, that's not even a lie. Irene's phone chimed. She checked it and her face darkened. You need to see this. It was a social media post from Violet, a photo of her hand wearing an enormous engagement ring, captioned, "Said yes to forever with my soulmate." Sometimes love takes unexpected paths to find its true destination. Unexpected paths? I laughed bitterly. Is that what she's calling it? There's more, Irene scrolled down. She's been telling people you abandoned Gerald because you couldn't handle the fertility issues. My hands shook as I reached for the wine bottle. Of course she has. The next morning, I met with Jeremy again. His office felt like a war room, with documents spread across his desk. I've set up everything, he said. Separate bank accounts, documentation of their affair, proof of the forged medical records. When the time comes, they won't know what hit them. And the fertility clinic? All paperwork is in order. They can't legally inform Gerald about any procedures. I pulled out my phone, showing him the engagement announcement. They're getting married in 6 months. Jeremy's eyebrows rose. That's ambitious. It's perfect, I said. By then, I'll be ready. Grace, Jeremy set down his pen. As your lawyer and friend, I need to ask, what's your endgame here? I met his eyes. Justice. Truth. And the family they tried to convince me I couldn't have. Later that day, I visited the fertility clinic for my first hormone injection. As the nurse prepared the shot, I thought about all the times I'd done this before, with Gerald holding my hand, both of us full of hope. Now I sat alone, but somehow feeling stronger. All done, the nurse said cheerfully. Remember, no strenuous activity for the next few days. That night, Gerald came home late again. I pretended to be asleep as he crept into bed, smelling of Violet's signature perfume. My phone lit up with a text from Dr. Chen, first follicle scan scheduled for Thursday. Looking good so far. I turned away from Gerald's sleeping form and typed back, I'll be there. The next few weeks passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and hormone injections. I told Gerald I was taking yoga classes, joining a book club, anything to explain my absences. He barely noticed, too wrapped up in his secret romance with my sister. Your body is responding perfectly, Dr. Chen said during one checkup. The egg retrieval should be next week. And then? She smiled. Then we fertilize them with the stored samples and wait. Are you ready for the possibility of multiple births? With your numbers, we might need to implant several embryos. I thought about Gerald and Violet, planning their perfect life together, thinking they'd won. I'm ready for anything, I said. Whatever it takes. Dr. Chin made some notes in my chart. In that case, let's schedule the retrieval for Monday. As I left the clinic, I touched my stomach gently. Soon, I thought. Soon they'll learn that karma doesn't just come around. Sometimes it multiplies. Triplets, Dr. Chin announced, pointing at the ultrasound screen. All 3 embryos took. See these 3 strong heartbeats? I lay on the examination table, tears streaming down my face as I watched the tiny flutters on the monitor. After all the deception, all the pain, here was my miracle, times 3. I'll give you a moment, Dr. Chin said softly, stepping out of the room. I pulled out my phone and texted Irene, 3. I'm having 3 babies. Her response was immediate. OMG. On my way with ice cream. By the time I got home, Gerald had left another note. Weekend business trip with the partners. Back Sunday. I knew he was really at a romantic getaway with Violet. They'd gotten bolder lately, not even trying to hide their meetings anymore. Irene arrived with 3 pints of ice cream. 1 for each baby. I'm going to get so fat, I laughed, already showing at 12 weeks. You're going to get caught if you stay here, she said, suddenly serious. You can't hide 3 babies forever. Already handled, I patted the stack of papers on my coffee table. Jeremy found me a house in Cambridge. I move next week. What about Gerald? I left divorce papers on his desk this morning. Cited irreconcilable differences. I spooned ice cream into my mouth. He'll be too relieved to question it. The divorce went through quickly. Gerald, eager to start his new life with Violet, agreed to all my terms. He never noticed the careful wording Jeremy had included about genetic material rights. For months later, I waddled through my new home, setting up the nursery with Irene's help. 3 cribs, she marveled, assembling the last one. Are you sure you can handle this alone? I'm not alone, I smiled. I have you, don't I? My phone buzzed. A text from Jeremy. Wedding date set. May 15th at the Grand Hotel. Perfect timing, I muttered. I'll be ready. The babies arrived 2 weeks early on a stormy April night. 3 perfect little girls, Lily, Rose, and Iris. As I held them for the first time, all thoughts of revenge momentarily faded. They were mine, wholly and completely mine. They looked just like him, Irene whispered, cradling Lily. They do, I agreed. That's rather the point. The next few weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings and diaper changes. The girls were surprisingly good babies, taking turns being fussy as if they'd coordinated their schedules. One morning, as I was feeding Rose, my phone lit up with a wedding invitation, sent to my old email address. They were inviting me, probably to prove there were no hard feelings. Your mommy's going to that wedding, I told Rose, who blinked up at me with Gerald's eyes. And you 3 are going to help her tell the truth. At 6 weeks old, the girls had their first photo shoot. Professional photos for documentation, Jeremy had insisted. Legal proof. These are perfect, Jeremy said, reviewing the photos in his office. The resemblance is undeniable. Have you seen the latest about their wedding? He pulled up Violet's social media. She'd been posting about fertility treatments, setting up her story about finally giving Gerald the family he deserved. She's telling everyone she's pregnant, Jeremy said. Due in December. I laughed. Well, won't that be interesting to explain? That evening, as I rocked Iris to sleep, I got another text from Gerald, the first since our divorce. Violet told me about the wedding invitation. I hope you'll come. We'd like to make peace. I showed the message to Irene, who was burping Lily. Make peace, she scoffed. More like show off their perfect life. Little do they know, I smiled, watching my daughters sleep. Little do they know. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Jeremy helped me gather all the documentation, DNA tests, fertility clinic records, proof of Gerald's condition, evidence of their affair, and the forged medical records. Are you ready for this? He asked, organizing the files. Once you do this, there's no going back. I looked at my girls, all three napping in their swings. They tried to convince me I couldn't be a mother, that I was broken. They need to face what they did. And the fallout? Sometimes, I said, touching Lily's tiny hand as she slept, the truth hurts. But lies hurt more. The wedding was 2 weeks away. I had everything prepared, the documents, the photos, the DNA tests. But most importantly, I had 3 beautiful baby girls who were about to turn their father's wedding into an unveiling of truth. Your daddy and aunt thought they could fool everyone, I whispered to my sleeping daughters. But you 3 are living proof of their lies. And soon, everyone will know. Violet's planning to announce her pregnancy during the reception toasts, Irene reported, scrolling through her phone. She'd maintained a friendly social media relationship with my sister, becoming our inside source. She's even wearing a loose dress to hint at a baby bump. I adjusted Rose's tiny bow while Lily and Iris napped in their carriers. How considerate of her to set the perfect stage. Grace, Irene set down her phone, walk me through the plan one more time. The ceremony starts at 2, I said, checking my own timeline. They'll do photos after, then the reception begins at 5. Violet plans to make her announcement during the toasts at 6. And you'll arrive. At 5:45. Jeremy will already be there as a guest. He's bringing all the documentation. The girl's nanny will wait with them in the hotel lobby until I text her. My phone buzzed. A message from Jeremy. DNA test results certified by the lab. Ironclad proof of paternity. The week before the wedding crawled by. I spent it rehearsing my speech, preparing the girls' outfits, and making sure every detail was perfect. The night before, I could barely sleep. Mommy's going to need you 3 to be on your best behavior tomorrow, I told my daughters as I fed them their morning bottles. It's going to be a big day. Irene arrived early to help me get ready. She zipped me into a sleek navy dress that showed off my post-baby body. All those midnight feeding sessions had melted the pregnancy weight faster than I'd expected. You look amazing, she said, adjusting my hair. They won't know what hit them. The nanny, Sarah, arrived at noon. We'd hired her specifically for this day after thorough background checks and several trial runs with the girls. Remember, I told her, wait in the lobby with the girls until I text. If anyone asks, you're watching them for a hotel guest. Got it, Sarah nodded, already familiar with our plan. Don't worry, they'll be perfect. My phone lit up with messages throughout the afternoon. Jeremy, in position. Half the town is here. Irene, ceremony just ended. Violet looks smug as hell. Jeremy, reception starting. You ready? I checked my reflection one last time. Ready. The grand hotel loomed before me, its elegant facade masking the drama about to unfold inside. I texted Sarah, get the girls ready. 20 minutes. The reception was in full swing when I walked in. Heads turned as I passed, whispers following in my wake. I spotted Gerald and Violet at the head table, lost in their own world. Jeremy appeared at my elbow, manila envelope in hand. Everything's set. Violet's father is about to start the toasts. I positioned myself near the back, watching as various family members stood to congratulate the happy couple. Finally, Violet rose, champagne glass in hand. Before anyone else speaks, she beamed, one hand resting on her stomach. Gerald and I have an announcement. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. Now, the ballroom doors opened. Sarah entered with the triple stroller, my 3 beautiful girls dressed in matching white dresses. The room fell silent. I have an announcement too, I said, my voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Gerald, Violet, meet your daughters. Well, Gerald's daughters, to be precise. Gerald's face went pale. Violet's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. That's impossible, Gerald stammered. I can't. Can't father children? I walked forward, Jeremy beside me with the documents. Funny how you never told Violet about that diagnosis. About your genetic condition. About how you let her blame me instead. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Violet's mother stood up, staring at the babies. They look just like Gerald. Because they are his, I said, taking the envelope from Jeremy. DNA tests prove it. Remember all those fertility treatments we did, Gerald? All those samples you provided? Turns out they worked after all. You had no right. Violet shrieked, her carefully constructed facade cracking. Actually, I had every right. I handed the legal documents to Gerald's father, a retired judge. Check the paperwork yourself. Everything was completely legal. Guests crowded around the stroller, exclaiming over the girl's resemblance to Gerald. His mother reached in to touch Lily's cheek, tears in her eyes. But I'm pregnant, Violet protested weakly. Are you? I raised an eyebrow. Like you were infertile? Like those medical records you forged? Should we wait 9 months to see if that's another lie? Gerald slumped in his chair, the truth finally hitting him. Triplets, he whispered. Yes, I smiled, lifting Rose from the stroller. Would you like to meet your daughters? Or should I say, your only children? Because we both know you'll never have any others. The room erupted in chaos. Violet's makeup streaked down her face as she ran from the room. Gerald's parents were demanding explanations. And in the middle of it all, my 3 perfect baby girls began to cry in perfect harmony, their wails echoing through the destroyed wedding reception like a symphony of justice. How could you do this to me? Violet emerged from the bathroom, her wedding dress wrinkled, mascara streaking her cheeks. Your own sister. How could I? I bounced Iris gently as she fussed. How could you forge medical documents to convince your sister she was barren? How could you steal her husband while pretending to support her? Gerald's mother cradled Lily, tears streaming down her face. They're so beautiful, Grace. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have believed their lies, like everyone else did? Gerald hadn't moved from his chair, staring at Rose in his father's arms. I don't understand, he mumbled. The doctors said I couldn't. That's right, Jeremy stepped forward, spreading medical records on the table. You were diagnosed with complete azoospermia 3 months before you left Grace. But instead of telling her the truth, you let your girlfriend hear forged documents blaming Grace for everything. The wedding guests huddled in groups, phones out, documenting every moment of the unfolding drama. Violet's father approached, his face red with rage. You've ruined everything, he shouted at me. No, Gerald's father interrupted, still holding the DNA test results. Your daughter ruined everything. These documents prove it. The forged medical records, the affair, it's all here. Violet collapsed into a chair. Gerald, tell them it's not true. Tell them we're having a baby. Gerald finally looked up, his face ashen. Are we, Violet? Are we really? The silence that followed was deafening. I was going to figure something out, Violet whispered. Figure something out? Gerald's mother's voice rose. You were going to fake a pregnancy too? More gasps from the crowd. Phones kept recording. Someone muttered, this is better than reality TV. Mrs. Anderson, I turned to Gerald's mother, would you like to know your granddaughters' names? She nodded eagerly, still holding Lily. You're holding Lily. Your husband has Rose, and this is Iris. I smiled at the babies. I thought they deserved names as beautiful as they are. Flower names, Gerald whispered. Like your grandmother's garden. The grandmother who raised me after our parents died. I looked at Violet. The grandmother you were too busy to visit when she was sick. Violet's makeup was completely ruined now. You always got everything. The attention, the love, the perfect life. I just wanted what I had. I finished for her. Well, congratulations. You got my husband. But I got something better, the truth. And 3 beautiful daughters who will never have to wonder if they're worthy of love. Gerald stood suddenly. Can I hold one? The room went quiet again. I hesitated, then carefully transferred Iris to his arms. He stared down at her tiny face, his hands shaking. She has my mother's nose, he choked out. They all do, I said softly. And your eyes. And your chin. I'm their father, he whispered, reality finally sinking in. I have daughters. I corrected him. You had your chance at being their father. You lost that right when you chose lies over truth. Violet lunged forward. You can't keep them from him. They're his children too. Actually, Jeremy stepped in, she can. The divorce agreement you so eagerly signed included very specific language about genetic material rights. Grace has full custody. You gave up any claim to children conceived through IVF when you signed those papers. But I didn't know. Gerald protested. No, I took Iris back from him. You didn't know because you were too busy planning your new life with my sister to read what you were signing. Too busy believing her lies to see the truth. The wedding planner appeared, nervously wringing her hands. Should I tell the band to start playing? A laugh rippled through the crowd. Violet's mother stood up. This wedding is over. Everyone go home. As guests began filing out, many stopped to peer at the babies, to touch my arm in support, to glare at Violet and Gerald. Their perfect wedding had become the perfect scandal. Grace, Gerald called as I prepared to leave. Please, can I be part of their lives? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering the room. The man I'd once loved, now reduced to a stranger in a groom's tuxedo, begging for scraps of what could have been his. You know what the saddest part is? I said quietly. If you'd just been honest about your condition, we could have faced it together. We could have been a family. Instead, you chose lies. I turned to the nanny. Sarah, let's take the girls home. As we walked out of the ruined wedding reception, 3 perfect babies sleeping peacefully in their stroller, I heard Violet's wail echo behind us. Gerald, where are you going? But I didn't look back. Some chapters need to end before better ones can begin. The aftermath hit like a tsunami. By morning, videos of the wedding confrontation had gone viral. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from reporters, distant relatives, and strangers offering support. You're trending on Twitter, Irene announced, scrolling through her phone while feeding Rose. People are calling you #RevengeQueen. Great, I sighed, changing Lily's diaper. Just what I wanted. Internet fame. My doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Gerald's mother standing on my porch, holding what looked like a photo album. Should I let her in? Irene asked. I nodded. She deserves to know her granddaughters. Grace, Gerald's mother rushed in, hugging me tightly. I'm so sorry. We had no idea what they were doing to you. She set the album down and immediately went to the babies. May I? Of course, I said, watching as she gently lifted Iris from her swing. I brought something, she gestured to the album. Gerald's baby photos. I thought you might want to see the resemblance. We sat together, flipping through pages while the girls napped. Every photo showed just how strongly my daughters had inherited their father's features. He's a fool, his mother said suddenly. Both of them are. Violet's been calling the house nonstop, trying to explain, but she shook her head. There's no explaining this away. My phone buzzed. A message from Jeremy. Gerald's at my office. He wants to negotiate visitation rights. No, I typed back. He made his choice. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was Violet. Don't open it, Irene warned, but I was already heading to the door. My sister stood there, still wearing yesterday's makeup, clutching a stack of papers. Grace, please. Just listen. Why should I? Because I'm pregnant, she blurted out. For real this time. I just found out. I laughed bitterly. With Gerald's baby? We both know that's impossible. No, it's not Gerald's. Her voice cracked. It's Marcus's. From the printing company, where I got the papers forged. Gerald's mother gasped behind me. Does Gerald know? He does now. Violet wiped her eyes. He left me last night. After the wedding, he said he couldn't trust anything I'd ever told him. Karma's funny that way, I said, starting to close the door. Wait. She thrust the papers forward. These are all the originals. The forged documents, the fake test results, everything. I'm turning myself in. I needed you to know I'm sorry. Before I could respond, another car pulled up. Gerald stepped out, looking like he hadn't slept. What are you doing here? Violet asked. Same as you, I guess, he said, not meeting her eyes. Trying to make things right. There's no making this right, I said firmly. I know, Gerald ran his hands through his hair. But our daughters. My daughters, I corrected. Please, he stepped closer. I'll do anything. Therapy, parenting classes, whatever you want. Just don't keep them from me forever. One of the babies started crying inside. Gerald's face crumpled at the sound. You lied to me, I said quietly. Both of you. You made me think I was broken, that I was less of a woman because I couldn't give you children. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I was scared, Gerald admitted. When I got my diagnosis, I couldn't face it. And then Violet suggested destroying my life instead of dealing with yours? I'm turning myself in, Violet repeated. The document fraud, the conspiracy. I'll plead guilty. Inside, all 3 babies were crying now. Gerald's mother went to tend to them, leaving us in this twisted family tableau on my front porch. I have to go take care of my daughters, I said. You both need to leave. Grace, Gerald called as I turned away. Will you ever forgive us? I looked at my sister, then at my ex-husband. 2 people I'd once loved more than anything, now strangers wearing the faces of betrayal. Forgiveness isn't something you earn by saying sorry, I replied. It's something you earn through actions, through change, through time. Right now, all I see are 2 people who got caught in their lies and want absolution. What can we do? Violet asked. Live with your choices, I said. Like I had to live with your lies. And maybe someday, when my daughters are old enough to understand, I'll let them decide if they want to know the whole story. I closed the door on their protests, returning to my babies. Gerald's mother was successfully calming them, humming an old lullaby. You're stronger than I ever knew, she said softly. I picked up Lily, breathing in her sweet baby scent. I had to be, for them. Outside, I heard car doors slam, engine start. The sound of consequences driving away, leaving 3 perfect reasons to look forward instead of back. Look what came in the mail, Irene said, handing me a newspaper clipping while Lily and Rose played with blocks on the floor. Iris was napping in her swing. The headline read, Local woman pleads guilty to document fraud, conspiracy. Below was Violet's mugshot, her face drawn and pale. 6 months probation and community service, I read aloud. Plus mandatory counseling. Are you okay? Irene asked. Before I could answer, my doorbell rang. Gerald's mother stood outside with a familiar-looking box. I found this in our attic, she said, setting the box on my coffee table. Your grandmother's recipe collection. Violet took it after she passed, but, well, it belongs to you. I opened the box, inhaling the scent of old paper and memories. I thought these were lost forever. Like a lot of things, she said, picking up Rose as she toddled over. Gerald asked about the girls again. He's been going to therapy, Irene added. Every week, according to his mother. I know, I said, watching Lily stack another block. His therapist contacted me, asked if I'd consider family counseling. The room went quiet except for the baby's babbling. Gerald's mother bounced Rose gently. And will you? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to keep them far away from all that pain. But another part. My phone buzzed. A text from Jeremy. Gerald filed for voluntary child support. No strings attached, no custody demands. Just wants to contribute. He's trying, his mother said softly. Trying doesn't undo what they did. No, she agreed. But it might help build something new. Lily pulled herself up using the coffee table, reaching for her grandmother. These moments, watching my daughters discover their world, seeing them loved by family who chose truth over lies, made everything worth it. The doorbell rang again. This time it was my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but there's someone sitting in a car outside. Been there for hours. Should I call the police? I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Violet sat in her car, just staring at the house. I'll handle it, I said, handing Lily to Irene. The autumn air was crisp as I walked to Violet's car. She rolled down her window, revealing dark circles under her eyes. I lost everything, she said without preamble. Marcus left when I got convicted. My job, my friends, everyone knows what I did. That's what truth does, I replied. It reveals who we really are. I see them sometimes, she nodded toward my house. At the park with you. They're beautiful. They are. I'm getting help, she said quietly. Real help, not just the court-mandated stuff. I needed to understand why I hurt you like that. A laugh drifted from my open front door, Lily or Rose, discovering some new delight. I don't expect forgiveness, Violet continued. I just needed you to know I understand now. What I took from you. What I tried to destroy. But you didn't destroy me, I said. You tried to break me, and instead, I became stronger. I became a mother, not because of you or Gerald, but in spite of you both. She nodded, tears falling. Can I see them sometime? Not now, but someday. That's not my decision anymore, I replied. Someday, they'll be old enough to choose for themselves. Until then, my job is to protect them, including from people who might hurt them like you hurt me. I understand, she whispered. Thank you for at least listening. As she drove away, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. The weight of betrayal lifting, replaced by the strength of survival. Inside, my daughters were having dinner, Gerald's mother and Irene helping with the chaos of feeding 3 toddlers. Everything okay? Irene asked. Actually, yes, I said, taking my place between Lily and Rose's high chairs. For the first time in a long time, everything's exactly as it should be. Iris threw her spoon, giggling as it clattered to the floor. Rose immediately did the same, followed by Lily, their synchronized mischief a reminder of how they came to be. You know, Gerald's mother said, retrieving the spoons, sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. I looked around my kitchen, at Irene, who stood by me through everything, at Gerald's mother, who chose truth over loyalty, at my 3 beautiful daughters, who gave me the strength to fight back. You're right, I smiled, wiping spaghetti sauce from Lily's chin. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Rose reached for me, sauce-covered hands and all, and I pulled her close, not caring about the mess. Because sometimes, the most perfect moments come after the hardest battles, and the sweetest victories aren't about destroying your enemies. They're about building something beautiful from the ashes of what they tried to destroy.
I've decided to buy a luxury car from you, Emma. Truthfully, as a regular person, I don't need such opulence, but my parents are considering a new car, and this one might be perfect for them. Since marrying Anthony, I've noticed a shift in his behavior. He seems more self-absorbed and even envious of the upscale car my parents gave me. Honestly, I'm fed up. My name is Emma, I'm 29 years old, and I met Anthony in college. We've been married for 2 years now. Anthony is quite the socialite, popular, and well-liked, which contrasts sharply with my introverted nature and small circle of close friends. Our relationship began unexpectedly. Initially, our connection grew from shared classes and study groups. His interest took me by surprise, but when he asked me out, I was so thrilled that I immediately accepted. That marked the start of our journey together. I was drawn to Anthony's charm, his laid-back attitude, and his commitment to his studies. He had many friends, including numerous fashionable and attractive women, so it seemed he would have no trouble finding another girlfriend if he chose to. Once, I nervously asked him if he thought I was the one for him. His reaction puzzled me. He looked surprised and questioned why I would ask such a thing. I admit I felt insecure and just wanted to understand why he chose me. After pondering for a moment, he simply said he was comfortable with me. It wasn't the heartfelt answer I hoped for, and before I could respond, he became preoccupied with his phone. Not wanting to argue, I changed the subject and apologized for bringing it up, but the doubts remained. Externally, our relationship seemed to progress smoothly. We graduated, got married, and settled into a condo. I secured a stable job, while Anthony pursued his graduate studies and worked part-time. When I mentioned our engagement to my mom, she was overjoyed, although she confessed that she and my dad had started to wonder when I'd introduce a boyfriend. I felt a bit guilty for not telling them about Anthony sooner, but my mom, understanding my independent streak, was just glad I had someone who cared about me. My parents have always been my role models. Like Anthony and me, They met in college and have upheld a profound love and respect for each other over the years. My dad climbed the corporate ladder, while my mom followed her passion for cooking and eventually taught culinary classes. They've always honored each other's independence and supported their dreams. I am determined to establish a marriage as enriching and supportive as that of my parents, despite having been raised in a financially comfortable family where I learned early on the importance of independence. This core value influenced my decision not to follow in Anthony's footsteps into graduate school. Instead, I aim to forge my path and stand independently. My dream has always been rather straightforward: to create a nurturing family environment like the one I was fortunate enough to experience, complete with a loving marriage and maybe children someday. Though it seems simple, for me, this is a profound goal. Changes began to emerge after Anthony and I started living together. While he was immersed in his graduate studies and managed a part-time job, his financial contributions were minimal. One day, I broached the subject, suggesting it might help if he could allocate more of his income towards our mutual expenses. His response was dismissive. "I do contribute, Emma. Didn't we agree you'd handle the living expenses when we moved in together?" This left me feeling uncomfortable and unsettled. Anthony's dream had always been to become a professor, which explained his dedication to his studies. However, as he pursued his academic ambitions, I felt increasingly like I was bearing the brunt of our financial responsibilities alone. Despite having reassured him that my stable job could cover our finances, his curt retort when I brought it up left me stammering a feeble agreement, unsure how to push back. He sighed heavily. "You wouldn't understand, Emma. Being a graduate student is expensive," he explained, then added as if it were a trivial afterthought, "Oh, and I need $26,000 for a research trip. Can you lend it to me? I'll pay you back." Such requests became more frequent, and the tension in our relationship intensified. Anthony often spent nights out, leaving me alone with meals that went cold and phone calls that remained unanswered. When he returned, his mood was invariably upbeat, and he would suddenly suggest plans or compliment my cooking, making me feel momentarily valued. Each instance of kindness from him gave me fleeting glimpses of the joyful marriage I yearned for, causing me to shy away from addressing our deeper issues. I was acutely aware that something was amiss. Feelings of loneliness and anxiety became my constant companions, caught as I was in a cycle of fleeting happiness and extended periods of isolation. I struggled to share these feelings with anyone, especially my parents, who were outwardly delighted about our marriage. However, they likely sensed that not all was well. After a long absence, I visited them, and my father suggested I stay for dinner. My mother went all out with the meal in a warm gesture of welcome. During dinner, my father mentioned that Aunt Margaret had recently stopped by. "She was asking about you," he said, describing Margaret as spirited, ambitious, and fiercely independent, the very traits that epitomized her. "I'll reach out to her soon, thanks, Dad," I replied, grateful for their gentle encouragement to reconnect with family. As my father shared fond memories of how much Margaret cared for me, he reminisced with a smile about how she often joked that Anthony had whisked me away, even though she had never planned to marry. Margaret had always been more of a mentor than just an aunt to me. I could discuss with her things that were too complex to broach with my parents. She had always understood me deeply and provided support, especially when I was navigating new chapters in my life. I had always been shy about opening up regarding my relationship with Anthony, especially with Margaret. However, a visit to my parents sparked a newfound eagerness to reconnect with her. A few days later, we met at a quaint cafe where Margaret, ever so fashionable, gave me a warm look and some friendly fashion advice. "Marriage is more than a ceremony, Emma," she said, smiling as she sipped her tea. "It's important to feel confident and maintain your appearance. Your outfit says a lot about you, so take care of yourself." I realized I had been neglecting my interests and quickly apologized for losing touch. Margaret, with a chuckle, responded, "That's just like you, Emma. It's fine to be earnest, but your timidity likely stems from not venturing out enough." However, hearing about Anthony made me happy. It seemed like you were finally ready to move forward. We hadn't spent a day just relaxing in such a long time, and the beautiful weather made our outing even more delightful. Settling down on the cafe's sunny terrace, I felt at ease enough to discuss my concerns about my relationship with Margaret. Initially, I thought that even a reserved person like me could make things work with Anthony, but recently, I was beginning to doubt it. Margaret listened without interrupting, her nods showing empathy. When I was done, she softly inquired, "Have you talked about any of this with your parents, Emma?" "No," I admitted. "I hesitated even telling you today. I didn't want to expose my vulnerabilities. I felt I needed to handle this myself to show that I could be independent. If my parents knew, they'd probably insist on me moving back home." Margaret respected my decision to deal with things on my own but offered comforting words. "If you ever need help, I'm here for you. Just let me know. I'll always support you, Emma, no matter where I am." About a month later, my mom called me nonchalantly. "Whenever you're free, could you drop by? It's nothing urgent." Since I had the next day off, I decided to visit them. As I approached the house, I noticed a new car in the driveway. Excited, I exclaimed, "Is this car new, Dad? Did you just buy it? Maybe I can take it for a spin." My excitement was evident as I admired the new vehicle. With a warm smile, my dad reassured me, "This car is yours, Emma. Use it as you like. It will be useful." My mom chimed in softly, "We remembered you liked this model when we saw it in a TV ad. We thought it would make a perfect gift for you, especially since you've been going through a tough time." Feeling low lately, my parents decided to cheer me up with a surprising gift, a shiny new SUV from a well-known international brand. This thoughtful gesture filled me with an overwhelming sense of support and the freedom to come home whenever things got too tough. Dad had even arranged a parking spot close to my condo to park the SUV. Overwhelmed by their generosity, I laughed in disbelief, finding it hard to grasp the extent of their kindness. Later, as I was driving downtown, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the car keys, and pressed the button. The SUV's lights flashed brightly around me. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What's with the new car?" Anthony asked. Turning around, I saw my husband, who had been away from home for ages. His unexpected presence rendered me speechless. Anthony looked at the car, a smug grin spreading across his face. "I see, a gift from your parents?" Every time I faced Anthony, I found it hard to speak up, but I was tired of feeling small. "Anthony, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling with newfound courage. Anthony's response was cruel and dismissive. "Are you just realizing this now? Did you think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His mocking laughter stung my ears. Something inside me snapped. "Then why did you marry me?" I retorted, louder than intended. Anthony's cold reply was blunt. "Wow, you're going to be that blunt about it? So marrying me was just a means to an end for you, huh? And now you want the car too? It's wasted on you." I was shocked by the harshness of his words. Anthony, unfazed by the pain he caused, added with chilling indifference, "You know we're getting a divorce. Without me, you'll never find another man. Think about it." With those cruel words, he left without a second glance, leaving me feeling both angry and heartbroken. Sitting in the driver's seat, my head throbbed with a headache as I tried to calm myself. Eventually, I reached out to Aunt Margaret for advice. After a few days of reflection, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents, who welcomed me with open arms. Life felt peaceful again for a while. However, that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Anthony showed up at my parents' house, accompanied by his parents. They all settled into the living room, and Anthony's father spoke sternly. "We're here to discuss our son's divorce," he began. As the conversation unfolded, I took a firm stand. "If you don't agree to the divorce," I warned Anthony, "I'll use Brian's connections at the university to jeopardize your future. It wouldn't be hard to damage the career of a junior registrar if their daughter files a complaint." Anthony, who seemed to care more now, was taken aback by my assertive approach. He felt my tactics were aggressive and intimidating. His father argued vehemently we could easily contest the divorce. Emma, beneath her simple appearance, is manipulative and greedy. Poor Anthony. I heard she even paid him to stay away. She must have entertained other men. We should take this to family court and claim Anthony was coerced into this divorce. But if Emma were to make a genuine apology, maybe things could be different. When Aunt Margaret suggested that giving up the SUV might help smooth things over, Anthony and his parents listened quietly, absorbing his father's protests. Just then, the doorbell rang and my mom answered it. Aunt Margaret walked in, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. "Sorry I'm late," Margaret said, joining the tense gathering. Anthony's family, who had only met Margaret once at my wedding, looked surprised. "What are you doing here?" Anthony's mother exclaimed, visibly annoyed. "It's rude to barge in like this. We're in the middle of something." Unfazed, Margaret replied, "You've heard about Anthony's divorce, haven't you? How would an outsider like you know about this?" Anthony's mother challenged. Margaret continued calmly, "I was informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my niece." Anthony's mother shot back, "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Are you still going to make accusations after seeing this?" Without missing a beat, Margaret pulled out a stack of documents from her bag and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. "I hired a private detective to look into this," she revealed. "It turns out Anthony has been cheating on Emma with multiple women. He hardly came home because of it, taking advantage of Emma's kindness and even asking her for money." The revelation left everyone in stunned silence, and the tone of the meeting shifted dramatically as everyone processed the gravity of Margaret's findings. I was deeply immersed in my university research, so when I did make it home, we spent time together sharing meals and going on trips. To the outside world, we appeared like any other married couple. "Say something, Emma," Anthony pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "You don't need to defend yourself," his father quickly reassured him, ready to take control of the situation. Margaret's unexpected intervention had brought to light the reality of my troubled marriage, revealing Anthony's deceit and the manipulation I had endured. This new information forced everyone, especially Anthony's parents, to reconsider their approach to the divorce negotiations. "It's not your fault," Anthony's mother hastily added, clutching the documents suspiciously. "These must be fabricated. Our Anthony would never do such things. He's a kind, outstanding son." "Kind to his parents, maybe," Aunt Margaret interjected sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. Despite her calm demeanor, her resolve was evident. She pulled out a photograph from the stack of documents. "I was at a hotel for a business meeting recently and saw Anthony there with another woman, looking quite cozy. I had the detective investigate Anthony as well, and the results confirmed my suspicions." Anthony's mother's face drained of color as she grabbed the documents to examine them closely. "What is this, Anthony? How long has this been going on? These are all lies, aren't they?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Anthony tried to snatch the documents back, denying everything, but it was too late. The seeds of doubt were sown. "You've been cheating on me? The car you wanted so badly was for her, wasn't it?" Anthony's mother accused, her voice cracking under the strain. No matter how much Anthony tried to soothe her, his mother was inconsolable. She stormed out of the house, tears streaming down her face, with Anthony stumbling after her, trying to explain. Amidst the chaos, Anthony blurted out, "Hey, wait, what about me?" and followed them, equally bewildered. The rest of us were left in stunned silence, but Aunt Margaret wore a satisfied smile, giving me a knowing wink. It was clear she had anticipated the dramatic turn of events and the necessary revelations that would unfold. After the tumultuous scene, Aunt Margaret confided in me that Anthony's parents had eventually separated. "You won't fall for such a terrible man again," she assured me, her tone protective yet empowering. "Let's focus on making you even more resilient. I'll teach you everything I know about grooming and self-care." Despite her busy schedule, Aunt Margaret made time for me, taking me out for meals and shopping trips. During this period, I soaked up a great deal from her, gaining a new perspective on self-care and confidence. Aunt Margaret's guidance not only helped heal my wounds, but also equipped me with the tools to build a stronger, more confident self. 1 year after my divorce, I made a life-altering decision to enroll in graduate school. This period marked a time of intense personal growth and transformation. One day, while waiting at a street intersection, I heard my name being called. I turned around to see Anthony, my ex-husband. He seemed genuinely surprised by my appearance and remarked on how much I had changed. At first glance, I barely recognized him. The man who once knew me as his unremarkable ex-wife now saw a woman who had blossomed into confidence and beauty. Meanwhile, Anthony's life had taken a sharp decline after his parents' very public and scandalous divorce. He had dropped out of graduate school after his parents, Kyle and Karen, withdrew their financial support amidst the turmoil he had caused. Struggling to cover his tuition and living expenses, the carefree lifestyle he once enjoyed was now just a memory. The women who were once interested in him had moved on, and his former social status had disappeared seemingly overnight. As Anthony was about to suggest we catch up, Jonathan, the man I was currently dating, approached us. His timing couldn't have been more perfect, signaling a clear demarcation between my past and the new chapter I was embarking on, one that no longer included Anthony. Nearby, a group of women couldn't help but admire Jonathan, wondering aloud if he was a model. Observing my brief exchange with Anthony, Jonathan gave him a polite nod and said, "It's okay, we're done here. Let's go," taking my hand confidently. Anthony remained rooted to the spot, visibly shocked as Jonathan and I continued on our way. My gaze stayed locked forward, concentrating on the road ahead and the bright prospects that lay before us. I didn't glance back even once as we departed. My name's Nancy, and at 31, you'd find me nestled in the local library, my sanctuary amidst a sea of books and dusty shelves. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my little corner of the world. I've always preferred the quiet, the understated life, away from any spotlight. Living in a small town, where gossip traveled faster than the wind, my days were a predictable cycle. Wake up, work, and then home to my cozy apartment filled with secondhand finds and piles of books. My social life might have seemed non-existent to some, and I thought I was okay with that, or at least I convinced myself I was. Raymond walked into the library on an ordinary day. He was on a quest for something different to read, his smile easy and his voice warm, like a ray of sunshine piercing through the clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous," he said, his eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and mischief. "Sure, what genre are you interested in?" I asked, adjusting my glasses, trying my best not to get lost in his gaze. "I don't know. Surprise me," he replied, his grin hinting at the simple pleasure he found in this small challenge. That was the start of it all. Our chat soon became the highlight of my days. At first we talked about books and I would suggest titles, but gradually our conversations evolved, branching into discussions about our lives, our thoughts, our dreams. Raymond was different. He really listened, making me feel heard and valued, a sensation that was foreign yet exhilarating to me. One day, he leaned over the counter with a playful spark in his eyes. "You know, Nancy, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" I laughed, a sound unfamiliar even to myself. "Well, where else would I go? It's not like this town is brimming with excitement," I responded. Raymond's reply came swiftly. "Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat." I hesitated, unaccustomed to such attention. "I don't know, Raymond." He quickly interjected. "Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who appreciates your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town." His confidence was contagious, and despite my reservations, I agreed. Okay, sure, but no fancy places. I don't do well with all that pomp, I warned. Deal, he said, his smile illuminating the room. I'll pick you up at 6. Wear something comfortable. That night truly changed everything. Raymond introduced me to parts of the town I'd never explored, even though I'd lived here all my life. He made me laugh, a real, heartfelt laugh that I hadn't realized I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and even my fears, never making me feel insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped, his expression serious. Nancy, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever met. You're genuine, and in a world full of pretense, that's incredibly rare. I was speechless. No one had ever spoken to me with such sincerity. Raymond. He gently placed a finger on my lips. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Nancy. I see the person you truly are. Raymond always had a way of making my days shine. His affection and kindness painted my ordinary moments in vibrant colors, and with every sweet word he spoke, he made me believe in myself a little more. When he proposed, it felt surreal. His earnest eyes asked, "Marry me, Nancy. I can't picture my life without you." My heart surged with joy, and without a second thought, I whispered, "Yes." Yet, before we could dive into wedding plans, a significant hurdle loomed, meeting his parents. Raymond warned me that his parents held high expectations, but he reassured me with confidence, "They'll adore you once they see how wonderful you are." Despite his words, anxiety gnawed at me. I rummaged through my closet, aiming for an outfit that whispered modesty yet respect. On the day of the meeting, I settled on a simple blue dress, hoping it was the perfect choice. As we drove to his childhood home, Raymond seemed distracted, more interested in the music than the upcoming introduction. His relaxed demeanor only intensified my nervous anticipation. Arriving at the house, my heart pounded with the weight of Raymond's earlier warnings. The dinner that followed felt more like an interrogation than a warm family meal. Raymond's parents peppered me with questions, and I struggled to showcase my genuine love for my job at the library, hoping to make a good impression. Meanwhile, Raymond remained unusually quiet, offering little support as I maneuvered through the tense conversation. After dinner, the ride home was filled with heavy silence. I was not only disappointed by the evening, but also by Raymond's apparent indifference. I voiced my feelings. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." Raymond's shrug and his lackadaisical, "Give it time, they just need to know you better," did little to ease my concerns. As time passed, it became clear that despite several more dinners, Raymond's parents were not becoming any fonder of me. They seemed to view me as an opportunist, a misjudgment that couldn't be further from the truth. I never cared about Raymond's money. In fact, I hardly knew he had any until he mentioned it one evening. "My parents are pretty old-fashioned," he told me. "They worry about things like money and status." One night, he came home looking unusually solemn. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding eye contact. My heart sank. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "It's my parents," he began, finally meeting my eyes. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." The word sounded harsh, unnatural. "Raymond, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or something." I was hurt, honestly. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But my love for Raymond outweighed my irritation over his parents' demands or any silly document. "Fine," I said, sharper than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, it doesn't matter. I just want you." Raymond looked relieved, which irked me a bit. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So, we signed the prenup. A lawyer his parents knew drafted it, ensuring neither of us could touch the other's assets if things went south. Signing felt like declaring distrust before we'd even begun, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I was in love, and isn't love supposed to conquer all? Our wedding was simple, just as I'd always wanted. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and a vow of forever. I moved into Raymond's place shortly after. It was a lovely home, not too fancy, but a world away from my old apartment. Raymond's parents lived nearby, which I soon discovered meant unexpected visits that felt more like inspections than warm family interactions. Life with Raymond initially seemed like a fairy tale, but it didn't take long for the gloss to fade, revealing a grim reality underneath. The transition wasn't sudden, but the signs were there, slowly chipping away at what we had built. His mother, Sophia, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She would drop by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house as if she were taking inventory. "Remember, this is Raymond's house. Everything here is his," she'd remind me pointedly. I kept my cool, replying, "I'm well aware, Sophia. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with. Nothing more." One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knick-knack that belonged to Raymond. "See this couch? Raymond's. That painting? Also Raymond's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. She enjoyed reminding me of my supposed place in their world. Raymond's father, Henry, wasn't any better. He and Sophia acted like they owned our house, not just visiting. They would demand coffee when they walked in, as if reinforcing their dominance in our space. When they walked in, their criticisms were immediate. My coffee was either too weak or too strong. Then, they'd park themselves in front of the TV, expecting me to cater to their every whim. "Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it," Henry would demand without even glancing my way. The worst part was that Raymond never stood up for me. He'd chuckle along, throwing in his digs. "Yeah, she's still figuring out how to get things right around here. Give her time." It was like I was living with a stranger, not the man I had married. This Raymond was someone else, someone dismissive and unsupportive. "Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this?" I'd confront him once his parents had left.
His response always diminished my feelings. "Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are." He'd shrug it off, making it seem like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. "They don't mean anything by it. Besides, we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right?" That comment was a slap in the face. So I was just a freeloader, the girl who had married into their little empire, expected to play by their rules or leave? My job at the library, which I cherished, was nothing but a joke to them, an additional reason for them to look down on me. Days blended into one another, each as monotonous as the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work, shelving books, when a sharp pain clutched my stomach, bending me double. It wasn't just stress. It was something serious. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic permeating the air. Alone in that hospital bed, without a single message or call from Raymond, I hit a new low. Just when I thought things couldn't sink any deeper, there was a knock at the door. A man stood there, looking completely out of place in my sterile hospital room. He was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase. "Nancy?" he asked. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" My voice was weak, tired from the pain and endless disappointments. "I'm Lawrence, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you," he replied, his tone formal, yet his eyes held a spark that made me listen. Curiosity piqued despite my situation. I motioned for him to continue. "It's about your great-uncle, Roy Gabriel. He recently passed away and, well, you're his sole heir, Nancy. He left you an inheritance." His words took a moment to sink in. "Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him in over 12 years. Lawrence nodded. Quite sure. He was a private man, but always remembered you. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. As I lay there, a mix of confusion and anticipation stirred within me. Lawrence cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents before me. Nancy, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. We're not just talking about cash here, though there's plenty of that. $99 million to be exact. I blinked, struggling to grasp the reality of the numbers. $99 million? I repeated, my voice cracking with the enormity of it. Lawrence continued, unfazed by my shock, explaining the specifics of my great-uncle's will. But there was more to the inheritance. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies, Nancy, Lawrence continued, his voice steady. These weren't just any investments. They were significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms around. The reality that I was becoming part owner of companies I had only ever heard about in the news felt like a fantasy. And there's property, Lawrence added, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Nancy. It's a mansion with history, acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the house, the kind I had only seen in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Don't forget about the antique car, he added with a slight smile as if anticipating my reaction. A classic, fully restored, and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, the situation bordering on surreal. An antique car, too? What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Lawrence's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then. And then there's the furniture and paintings inside the house, genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room felt smaller, the air thicker as I tried to digest everything he was saying. So, I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture? That's unbelievable. It's all yours, Nancy. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special? I felt anything but special, lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't even know existed. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Raymond's name flashed on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Lawrence. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Nancy. Change it did. After the unexpected windfall landed in my lap, Raymond and his folks seemed to turn a new leaf, or so it appeared. Their daily hospital visits were like scenes from a sappy movie. Raymond, who couldn't be bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned furrow on his brow. "How are you feeling today, love?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Sophia, was even more theatrical, if possible. "Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get back home. Just wait," she said, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden. Yet I played along, smiling weakly, thanking them for their care. But suspicion gnawed at me, urging me to look beyond their act. So, one day, I did just that. After their routine visit, I mustered the strength to slip out of my bed and follow them, my heart pounding with every step. Hiding behind a corner, I listened in as their true selves unfolded with no audience to perform for. Their laughter was the first thing I heard, harsh and revealing. The harshness of their words echoed in the sterile hospital corridor. "Can you believe how easy this is? She's so gullible, falling right into our trap," Raymond chuckled, his amusement a stark contrast to the setting. Sophia, ever the strategist, added with a sharp tone, "Just make sure she's fully committed, Raymond. Once you two start a family, she'll never be able to leave. Then we'll have control over her and her fortune." Their words, cruel and calculated, didn't shock me. Disappointment? Absolutely. But surprise? Not at all. They had shown their true colors, and I was done painting over them with shades of denial. As I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words ignited a determination within me. They saw me merely as a ticket to wealth, a tool to secure their future, but I was not going to play their game any longer. Lying in that bed, my mind raced as a clear, firm plan took shape. I was going to turn the tables on Raymond and his manipulative family. They underestimated me and saw me as weak, but they were about to discover just how wrong they were. Once discharged and back at the house that was supposed to be my home, I felt like an outsider. Raymond and his parents were there, their faces adorned with feigned concern and eager anticipation. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Raymond broke the silence with a tone that tried to mask his greed with sweetness. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried." Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze squarely, seeing the man I once thought I knew. "I'm feeling better, thanks, but we need to talk. All of us," I said, my voice steady despite the inner turmoil. Sophia, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "Of course, dear. We're here for you, whatever you need." It was now or never. Taking a deep breath, I laid out my stance. "I'm filing for divorce, Raymond, and before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell silent, the air seemingly sucked out of it. Raymond's face paled, his mask slipping to reveal the panic underneath. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy." The word happy tasted bitter in my mouth. "Happy? You, your mom, and your dad have made my life miserable. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now suddenly you're concerned about me because I have something you want." Raymond stammered, struggling to find the words. But Sophia, always quick, jumped in. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of them. This is what saved me. You thought you could manipulate me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for." Henry, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turns sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here." Moving into my place was the breath of fresh air I desperately needed. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I had just left behind. It was a new beginning, away from the manipulation and greed, a chance to finally breathe and reclaim my independence. Leaving behind that chapter of my life was more than just moving to a new apartment. It was my declaration of independence, a fresh start on my terms. Almost immediately, the phone calls began. Raymond was the first, his voice thick with desperation, trying to pierce the silence I had welcomed. "Nancy, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out. I know we can," he pleaded. But his words fell on deaf ears. I was resolute, and no amount of begging would sway me. "Raymond, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that," I replied, my voice leaving no room for misunderstanding. Not long after, Sophia made her attempt, her voice a toxic mix of anger and manipulation. "Ungrateful after everything we've done for you. You owe us, Nancy. You're making a huge mistake." "Owe you? For what, Sophia? For making me feel like nothing more than a burden? No, I don't owe you anything." Hanging up on her felt like shedding a heavy weight, the final snip of the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Raymond and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very document they had insisted on, the prenuptial agreement, was now the source of their family strife. With my great uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found purpose and a way to give back. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and tough decisions, but standing in my bookstore, surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Raymond and his family's manipulation. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to fresh starts, I murmured to myself, raising a glass in the quiet of the evening after locking up the bookstore. The path before me was uncharted, shrouded in mystery, yet it belonged to me alone, brimming with potential and the hopeful prospect of new joys. With each step forward, I embraced the journey, ready to uncover the opportunities and happiness that lay ahead. Hello, my name is Janice, and I want to share a story with you. A story that's full of twists and turns involving love, betrayal, and a quest for self-respect. Before we jump in, let me introduce the main characters of this drama. It begins with me, Janice. I was born into a well-off family, which some might view as privileged. From the outside, it looked like I had it all, a life of luxury from the start. However, I was taught to appreciate hard work and to earn my keep, rather than relying on family wealth. My father is a self-made mogul in the world of engine additives, having transformed a small niche into a thriving empire. My mother, equally industrious, created her chain of successful beauty salons, becoming a well-known figure in the beauty industry. Their divorce, when I was 21, was handled with grace. They split their assets evenly and maintained a friendship, which was no small feat. My father chose to remain single, immersing himself in his business and enjoying his independence. Meanwhile, my mother remarried, though I remained her only child. Then there's Matthew, my husband, who, as time would reveal, became the catalyst for a significant upheaval in my life. We married shortly after I graduated from college and had just begun a job teaching music to energetic children, a job I loved. Everything seemed perfect until I got pregnant, and that's when Matthew's true nature began to surface. One lazy Sunday, as he relaxed on the sofa, Matthew suggested out of the blue that I should quit my job to stay home with the baby. "Why don't you just quit your job and stay at home? We'll manage," he said nonchalantly. I was stunned. Quitting my job wasn't feasible on his salary alone, and besides, I was passionate about my work. But Matthew dismissed my concerns with a smirk, suggesting we could easily rely on my father's wealth. I was infuriated by his assumption that we could just tap into my parents' resources. This wasn't the first time he'd hinted at it, but discussing it so casually felt disrespectful. The situation escalated further during a dinner with his parents, where he brought it up again. Both his mother, sharp and opportunistic, and his father, who never missed a chance to offer advice, enthusiastically supported the idea, painting grand visions of a comfortable life funded by my family's money. Each comment felt like a deeper betrayal, as if they saw me not as a person, but as a gateway to an easier life. That night, as I lay beside Matthew, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. I questioned him softly, hoping I'd misunderstood his intentions. He turned to face me, his eyes once tender, now calculating, and said, "It's not about need, Janice. It's about being smart. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take advantage of that?" The word deserve echoed in my mind long after he fell asleep. It became clear that our views on dignity and independence were fundamentally different. This realization was the beginning of a profound personal journey for me, one where I would have to decide how much of my values I was willing to compromise. We were on divergent paths, holding different values close to our hearts. I found myself awake, staring at the ceiling, grappling with missed warnings and uncertain futures. Despite the initial clash over financial independence and personal pride with Matthew, I held a faint hope that we might realign our perspectives. Unfortunately, I was mistaken. Enter Matthew's parents from stage left, bringing with them a whirlwind of chaos. Matthew's parents were far from paragons of self-sufficiency. They had a knack for locating freebies, and my family's financial stability was like a siren call to them. One evening, as we sat in our modest living room, David began pitching a new business venture that just needed a little startup cash. Mary, with her cloyingly sweet tone that could induce a toothache, chimed in. "Janice, darling, with your family's backing, you could give us a leg up on this. It's practically a sure thing." I maintained my composure with effort. "Mary, David, I've mentioned before that we're handling our finances without outside help. My parents' wealth isn't part of this conversation." But David persisted like a seasoned salesman. "Come on, Janice. You wouldn't even notice the money gone. What's a few thousand to your dad? He probably drops that on golf over a weekend."
I was stunned by their audacity. There they were in our home, enjoying our hospitality, yet shamelessly eyeing my family's earnings as if entitled to them. Matthew attempted to mediate. "Maybe they have a point, Em. It's just a loan, right? We'd be helping the family." The word family tasted bitter. "Matthew, since when did it become our responsibility to fund your parents' ventures?" The atmosphere turned frosty. Mary, never one to miss a chance for drama, exclaimed, "Well, I never. Here we thought family supported each other. But if you're going to be stingy—" Seeing red, I retorted, "Working for what you have isn't stingy, Mary. It's called being responsible. Maybe that's something you should consider." David tried to defuse the tension. "Look, Janice, let's not get upset. We're just talking here." "Talking, right?" I replied sarcastically, frustrated that our conversations always circled back to how my family could solve their problems. After they left, with Matthew apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was an outright intrusion by two people who viewed me not as a family member, but as an easy financial resource. When our daughter Elizabeth was born, I hoped for a change, but the dynamics only intensified. Matthew's parents arrived at the hospital with a cheap, clearance-tagged oneness, while my parents brought a beautifully hand-knit blanket and quality baby essentials. Mary's response to their generosity was laced with scorn and jealousy. "Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they? Must be nice to just throw money around. They could have bought you a house instead of all this fluff." Matthew laughed along. "Yeah, Mom's right, Em. Your folks don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh?" Holding our newborn, my heart sank. Here I was, a new mother, caught between the joy of my daughter's arrival and the unyielding pressure of familial expectations, struggling to navigate a path that honored my values while somehow maintaining peace. The realization dawned that this struggle wasn't just about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and the kind of future I wanted for my own family. As I held our newborn daughter, all Matthew and his parents seemed to focus on was how my parents had chosen to spend their money. It was painful hearing Matthew echo his mother's mercenary thoughts. It made me question, to them, was our daughter just another way to secure financial gains? I attempted to keep the peace, insisting, "It's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts." But David was relentless, suggesting, "Sure, but think about it. Investing in property now, that's a gift that keeps on giving." The car ride home from the hospital was strained. Matthew tried to reassure me, claiming his parents were just old-fashioned and meant no harm. Yet, doubts began to gnaw at me, wondering if Matthew's affection was genuine or if he was more interested in my family's wealth. A few weeks later, during another uninvited visit, the topic arose again. We were squeezed into our living room, Elizabeth fussing in my arms, and Mary couldn't resist commenting on the new stroller my mom had gifted us. "Must be nice having your folks shower Elizabeth with all these fancy toys and gadgets. Though a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think?" she said, her voice laden with passive aggression. Matthew, sitting next to his mom, agreed. "Actually, babe, we've been thinking, maybe your parents could help with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right?"
I was stunned. Not only were Matthew's parents relentless, but now Matthew was echoing their sentiments, turning our daughter's birth into leverage for financial gain. It felt as though I was trapped in a twisted reality where love and family were overshadowed by material wealth. Is that what this is about for you, Matthew? Using my parents for money? I couldn't mask the hurt in my voice. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Matthew seemed taken aback, but Mary merely sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are wealthy, it's only practical to think about these things. After they left, I lay awake, Elizabeth sleeping peacefully beside me, and the harsh truth hit me. My marriage and family felt like a transaction, and I was the currency. The ensuing years were indeed a roller coaster. Elizabeth blossomed into a spirited 4-year-old, brimming with life and laughter, but life threw unexpected curveballs. First, it was my mother. Her accident was sudden and devastating. I was engulfed in grief, struggling to hold myself together for Elizabeth's sake. Yet, Matthew's initial response wasn't to ask how I was coping, but rather, "So, how much are you getting from your mom's will?" It felt like a slap in the face. My mother hadn't even been laid to rest, and here he was, eyeing her legacy like a vulture. According to my mom's will, I inherited the beauty salon chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Matthew was eager to step in. "Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business," he offered with all his usual confidence. Lost in my grief, I allowed him to take the lead, though I ensured the ownership papers stayed in my name. I hoped, perhaps naively, that he might turn things around for us. Then, barely a year later, my father passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short period shattered something inside me. I needed Matthew more than ever, yet I was beginning to understand that our views on money, support, and family were worlds apart. The day after my father passed away, I was reeling from the loss, hoping for some semblance of sympathy, or at least a respectful silence from Matthew and his parents. Unfortunately, that was not to be. As soon as they walked through the door, David barely hid his excitement, eagerly speculating about the inheritance. "So, Janice, there must be a hefty sum coming your way, huh?" His eyes gleamed with barely contained glee. I saw red. "Can you not, for once, just stop talking about money?" I exploded, my words ringing sharply through the room. Mary adopted an offended demeanor immediately. "Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude." Matthew attempted to smooth things over, as usual. They're just curious. It's a big deal, you know." "A big deal?" I echoed, my voice rising in disbelief. "My parents are gone, Matthew, and all you and your parents can think about is cashing in. Is that all I am to you? A bank?" The room fell silent, the tension so thick it felt tangible. Matthew glanced between me and his parents, mumbling a half-hearted apology. But the damage was done. I could no longer stand the sight of their greed, their complete lack of empathy. "Get out," I said, my voice steady but ice-cold.
They left, Mary muttering under her breath and David scowling. Matthew lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior, but I was beyond listening. 3 days later, Matthew burst through the door, his face alight with what he considered good news. "Babe, I've got awesome news," he exclaimed, barely containing his excitement. "I've struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it?" My jaw dropped. "What? You did what? Without even asking me?" I was seething, a mixture of betrayal and disbelief coursing through me. Before we could delve into a serious discussion, his parents showed up, ready to celebrate as if we'd won the lottery. They brought a lavish feast from a fancy restaurant and high-roller cigars. Mary was beaming, waving the cigars in my face. "Guess what, honey? We've sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast." I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare. "Hold on, you what?" "Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach with all that humidity and the winds with a kid. Are you out of your mind?" Mary dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous." "Where is this money coming from?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin.
Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it. Yachts, private jets. We're living the dream. Mary's eyes sparkled with dollar signs. I turned to Matthew, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? Babe, it makes sense, Matthew insisted. Managing both businesses will be too much. We need to focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The greed, the audacity, it was all too much. Show me the financials for the salon, I demanded. I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions. Matthew squirmed, avoiding eye contact. Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable. His parents chimed in, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But as they spoke, it became painfully clear. This wasn't just about securing a comfortable future. It was about exploiting my grief and inheritance for their gain. As I surveyed the scene before me, all I could envision were vultures circling overhead. Why the sudden rush to sell the hairdressing shops? I pressed Tom for an explanation. With a nonchalant shrug that seemed to dismiss the gravity of the situation, he replied with what he thought was rationality. Look, after your dad's passing, managing both businesses doesn't add up. We need to concentrate on what's more profitable. The auto oil venture is literally striking gold compared to the salons. His parents quickly joined the conversation, eagerly chiming in. Think about it, dear. Selling those small shops could set you up for a life of comfort and luxury. Why bother with them? His mother's voice was coated with greed, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Their blatant greed made my skin crawl. I want you all to leave, I demanded, my voice steady and strong. This is a time for mourning, not for scavenging through what he left behind. Matthew attempted to interject, but I silenced him. And another thing. This inheritance we're discussing, it's mine. You and your parents have no say in this matter. The room chilled as they realized I was not as compliant as they had assumed. With heavy steps and darker scowls, they left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the looming battle ahead. The day after my father's funeral was bleak, draped in a fog of sorrow. Matthew, however, seemed oblivious to the somber mood. Over a lackluster breakfast, he was already plotting. We need to call a meeting with your father's company executives pronto, he declared, his voice cutting through the silence aggressively. I paused, toast in hand, and looked at him. Matthew, my father has just been laid to rest. Can't this wait? I need time to process all this. He dismissed my concerns with a casual flick of his hand, emphasizing that time was money and we had to act swiftly. Frustrated and seeking some solid footing, I contacted our family lawyer for a detailed overview of the barbershop chain's status and an insight into my father's business dealings. A month swirled past, filled with legal terms and financial statements, during which Matthew and his parents returned, bombarding me with unsolicited advice and greedy propositions. Without a greeting, Matthew dived into conversation. You know, I've been thinking, I'm the right man to take over your dad's company. His audacious statement left me dumbfounded, but he wasn't finished. And I'll need a new car, something that fits a business leader.
The latest BMW should suffice. Before I could respond, Mary jumped in with her extravagant demands. The beach house is nearly done. We just need an additional $460,000 for finishing touches and some extra for new luxury furniture. And darling, I expect you to fund an account for my expenses. I need to maintain my lifestyle. Listening to their relentless demands, something within me snapped. No more. Standing firm, clutching the divorce papers like a protective talisman, I interrupted their chatter. Matthew, we need to talk, I declared, placing the documents in front of him on the coffee table. He picked them up, confusion etching his face. What's this? He managed to ask, voice trembling. Divorce papers, I announced, each word clear and decisive. I've had the business audited, Matthew. You've driven it to the brink of collapse.
As I confronted Matthew about the management of our business, his face paled, his demeanor that of a child caught in a misdeed. "I was trying to make things better," he stammered, his excuses as fragile as his waning confidence. "Make it better? By firing our most talented staff and neglecting the essentials that made the business thrive?" I retorted, my voice rising, fueled by a potent mix of anger and betrayal. Mary, ever the meddler, couldn't resist butting in. "Now, dear, let's remember he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, though it was void of any joy. "Nice try, but everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room fell silent, their grandiose plans crumbling. "And another thing," I continued, fixing Matthew with a firm gaze, "you're going to repay every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce sank in, Matthew became desperate. "Please, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. Not to be outdone in theatrics, his parents launched into a tearful saga about how they had sunk all their funds into the coastal house, a property now at risk without further investment. "We're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, her tears flowing freely. "Please think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their prior actions, feeling nothing but cold detachment. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I said, my tone firm and resolute. With newfound determination, I guided them to the door, closing it, and this chapter of my life behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future. Selling the apartment that Matthew and I once shared provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for far too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but surely. When they finally caught up with Matthew, he was ordered by the courts to compensate for the turmoil he had inflicted on the hairdresser chain. His recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him be held accountable was a bittersweet vindication for all the hardships he had caused. Out of nowhere, my phone rang one day, and on the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice tinged with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place. Any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts before responding. "You made your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. "It's time you lie in it." Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me, my anger at their continued sense of entitlement undeniable, but also a profound relief at having finally set firm boundaries. After the tumultuous divorce and reclaiming control over my mom's hairdressing chain, life began to brighten again. It was a challenging journey, but gradually, the salons started to regain their former vibrancy. Welcoming back the talented stylists we'd lost felt like a triumphant parade. Watching them walk through those doors again, ready to weave their magic, breathe life back into the place. It turned out I was more suited for the business world than I ever imagined. Every day brought new lessons and surprises about what I could achieve. If not for the harsh twists life threw my way, I might never have discovered this capability within myself. Managing my dad's car oil business was another challenge. For now, I decided to hire a manager to oversee operations while I acclimated to the industry. "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," I told him, making it clear that I was still the one in charge. I thought about the future. Maybe when Elizabeth is around 22, I might pass it on to her, if she's interested. I wanted her to have options, to choose her path. Meanwhile, our new home, just Elizabeth and me, became a sanctuary of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos we had left behind. It was small, but it was ours, a place where we could grow, heal, and start anew. Every corner of our home was filled with laughter, every nook cradling a memory we were creating together. In the garden, Elizabeth's laughter was balm to my soul. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she'd say, her eyes alight with wonder and admiration. "You're going to be even more amazing," I'd respond, pulling her into a hug. I knew deep down that we were on the brink of something wonderful. Together, we were unstoppable, ready to embrace whatever the future held with open arms and hopeful hearts.
My name is Diana, and there was a time when I thought I had everything neatly arranged in my life. I had a successful career as the head of marketing, a loving husband named Bob, and a stable, comfortable existence. I was proud to be financially independent, diligently paying off our mortgage with my earnings. Family played a central role for us. Bob's younger brother, Nathan, and their mother, Judy, were constants in our lives. Their father had passed away some years before, leaving the brothers particularly protective of their mom. It was endearing to see, and it deepened my affection for Bob, watching how devotedly he cared for his family. Initially, Judy seemed quite fond of me. During family get-togethers, we would chat over coffee, and she often inquired about my job in marketing, nodding with what seemed like genuine respect as she remarked on the importance of my work. I cherished her approval and yearned to be an integral part of Bob's close-knit family circle. The early years of our marriage were filled with joyous family activities, weekend barbecues, holiday feasts, and spontaneous game nights. I remember one particularly lively Thanksgiving at Judy's house, where the air was filled with laughter and overlapping conversations. "Pass the gravy, will you?" Bob's uncle would jovially demand, to which Judy playfully retorted, yet always with a smile as she passed the gravy boat. I felt a true sense of belonging, surrounded by what had become my family too. However, a troubling undercurrent surfaced during a New Year's Eve celebration at Judy's. I was topping up my wine in the kitchen when I overheard her in the living room, snidely commenting on what another family member, Lori, was wearing. Lori, a single mother and cousin of Bob's, was struggling financially. Judy's words were cutting. "That dress must have cost all of $10, she scoffed, implying Lori was out of her depth trying to socialize with those who were more financially secure. My heart sank with embarrassment for Lori. This was not the warm, welcoming family I thought I knew. As time went on, the initial signs of teasing I had dismissed as harmless became increasingly apparent as cruelty. Judy frequently gathered with Bob and Nathan, whispering and snickering as they cast judgmental glances around the room at other relatives and friends, often bursting into suppressed laughter. One Easter Sunday, I reached my limit. Judy was dominating the conversation in the living room, her sons by her side as she made a derogatory remark about another relative's new car. "Probably got it from the buy here, pay here a lot. She'll be paying it off until she's 70, Judy speculated with a smirk. Compelled by a surge of protectiveness, I confronted her. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "Don't you think that's a bit much? Janet can probably hear you." The room fell silent. Judy's gaze was piercing as she looked up at me with thinly veiled scorn. "Well," she retorted sarcastically, "looks like we've offended your delicate sensibilities, Diana." Bob and Nathan exchanged uneasy looks. "I just think it's rude," I continued, my voice firm despite my racing heart. "Why do you always have to put people down?" Judy's superficial smile faded. "If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Why don't you go sit somewhere else?" Feeling as though I had been metaphorically slapped, I turned to Bob, hoping for his support. But Bob just looked down at the floor. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "I will." From that day forward, family gatherings turned into a profoundly uncomfortable ordeal. I would sit by myself, nursing a drink, while Bob remained glued to his mother's side. Occasionally, he'd send me an apologetic glance, but he never came to sit with me. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner,
I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Why don't you ever stand up to her?" I asked him. Bob sighed deeply, his hand running through his hair in distress. "She's my mother, Diana. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to tell her she's being mean. I want you to support me." But he never did. Gradually, I began to find any excuse to skip these family events, citing work emergencies, migraines, anything to avoid the icy stares and whispered criticisms. Just when I thought things couldn't get more strained, life threw me a curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. Holding the pregnancy test with its 2 pink lines staring back at me, I called for Bob, my voice quivering. He appeared at the bathroom door, concern etching his face. Wordlessly, I handed him the test. His eyes widened, and pulling me into an embrace for a moment, I felt that perhaps things could turn around. Maybe this baby would mend the growing rifts between us.
But the pregnancy was difficult from the start. I suffered from constant nausea, dizziness, and the looming threat of miscarriage. My doctor prescribed bed rest, and as the weeks dragged on, my condition worsened. My eyesight began to deteriorate, a rare and potentially permanent complication, making it impossible to continue working. Quitting my job, I felt more isolated than ever and deeply needed Bob's presence. However, Bob seemed increasingly distant. He often came home late, blaming extra work or outings with colleagues, and more often than not, I fell asleep alone, the sound of the front door closing jarring me awake in the dead of night. When the day for my C-section arrived, my deteriorated eyesight meant that a natural birth was too risky. As I lay on the cold operating table, excitement and fear coursed through me. "Where's Bob?" I asked the nurse, my voice shaking. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Your husband's in the waiting room, dear. He said he'd rather stay there." The surgery went smoothly, and soon the beautiful sound of my son's first cry filled the room. As they placed him on my chest, a rush of overwhelming love took my breath away. Later, in the recovery room, Bob finally appeared. His face was a mask of discomfort and annoyance. "Look, Diana, I've got to say something. This whole thing, it's not right," he said. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" His frustration was palpable as he spoke. "Normal women give birth on their own without all this surgery crap. And men? We're not supposed to be here for this. We should be meeting our wives and kids at home like in the old days." His words struck me deeply. "Bob, I couldn't risk." But he cut me off. "Save it. I'm heading home. This place gives me the creeps." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, with Bob rarely at home. Bob was often absent when he was home, and when he was around, he hardly contributed to caring for our son. Instead, he'd grumble irritably as our baby cried during the night. "Can't you quiet him down?" Exhausted, I'd reply, "I'm trying. He's teething, Bob. It's painful for him." Yet Bob's patience was thinning. "You're always focused on the kid. What about me? What about what I need?" His words stunned me. Here I was, barely managing minimal sleep, still healing from a significant surgery, and he was upset about our diminished intimacy. As the months passed, Bob's displeasure only deepened. One night, while I tried to calm our restless 7-month-old, Bob announced abruptly, "You need to start working again." Shocked, I faced him. "But what about the baby?" "We'll get a nanny," he interjected. "We can't go on like this, Diana. We're running out of money." I wanted to protest, to say our baby needed me, that I wasn't prepared to leave him yet, but the firm set of Bob's stopped me. Reluctantly, I started looking for jobs. With my vision still impaired, job hunting was daunting. I eventually found a role at a smaller firm where the salary was notably less than my previous job. When I shared this with Bob, he was dismissively unsupportive. "That's all? We're paying a nanny for this?" Frustration filled his words. Tears stung my eyes as I responded, "I'm doing all I can, Bob. It's challenging with my vision not fully recovered." He just muttered excuses under his breath and left the room. Thus began a grueling new chapter of my life. Mornings were a rush to get to work.
each day leaving a pang of guilt as I handed my son over to the nanny. My days were a blur, struggling to keep up at work with compromised eyesight, and then returning to a home where resentment from my husband awaited, alongside a child who needed my love and care. Time seemed to slip by in a relentless cycle of work, childcare, and escalating tension at home. Family gatherings, already strained, were made worse by Judy's actions. She would grandstand as the affectionate grandmother when others were watching, yet her detachment was evident. She'd beckon our son with a sweet tone, "Come to Grandma," but he, sensing the coldness, would cling to me instead. Judy's mood would sour instantly. "What have you been telling him about me?" she'd accuse, venom in her voice. "You're turning my grandson against me." Exhausted, I would attempt to explain, "He just doesn't know you well, Judy. Maybe if you visited more." But she would cut me off. "Don't you dare blame this on me," and storm off to complain to Bob.
On an unremarkable Tuesday, my life took another turn. I was holding a positive pregnancy test, the lines clear and unmistakable. Panic gripped me as I remembered the hardships of my first pregnancy. Was I strong enough to endure this again? Realizing I was already well into the first trimester, the path forward seemed chosen for me. Trembling, I called Bob at work to break the news. His impatient voice came through. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," I said. After a lengthy silence, he replied, "Look, Diana, I'm swamped. We'll talk later. Just keep your job. We can't lose that income." Then he hung up. Alone, with the phone still in my hand, I felt more isolated than ever. However, this pregnancy was less taxing than the first. My morning sickness was less severe, and my vision remained stable. With renewed determination, I continued working, focused on supporting my growing family amidst the challenges. As my pregnancy progressed and my belly grew, the emotional gap between Bob and me seemed to widen drastically. He spent increasing amounts of time at his mother's house, often returning home late into the night. One evening, as I struggled to put our toddler to bed while managing my discomfort, Bob walked in. "Hey," I greeted him, hopeful for some assistance. "Can you read him a story? I'm really tired." Bob glanced at us, then at his watch, and sighed. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait up." The door shut behind him, and a tear rolled down my cheek. I looked down at my son, his big eyes trusting and unaware of my sorrow, and then at my belly, feeling a deep love for the child I had yet to meet. As my 7th month of pregnancy neared, Thanksgiving approached. Guests began to arrive in the afternoon. My parents were among the first, with my mom immediately donning an apron to assist in the kitchen. Friends and family filled our home, bringing with them a buzz of conversation and laughter. Just as I was setting the table for dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Nathan, Bob's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Victoria," Nathan beamed, introducing his fiancée. The room momentarily fell silent, then erupted in a chorus of congratulations. I forced a smile, trying not to dwell on the flicker of envy I felt, as I noticed how Bob's face brightened at his brother's happiness. Judy arrived shortly after, her eyes widening appreciatively as she took in Victoria. "Well," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with enthusiasm, "aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Throughout the dinner, Judy doted on Victoria, peppering her with questions and hanging on her every word. I did my best to focus on being a gracious hostess, but couldn't ignore their conversation. "So, Victoria," Judy said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear, "Nathan tells me you're a manager at National Bank. How prestigious." Victoria nodded, slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, I've been there for about 4 years now." Judy beamed. "You must be doing very well for yourself. Unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty," she added, casting a pointed look my way. I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. Beside me, my mother tensed, ready to defend me, but I gently touched her arm, silently pleading with her not to escalate the situation. Judy's voice oozed faux sweetness as she continued.
Victoria here makes $120,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful. Tears welled up in my eyes as I remembered the years I had spent supporting our family, paying the mortgage, and building a career I was proud of, all now seemingly forgotten. I think we should continue this lovely evening somewhere more suitable, Judy announced, standing. Victoria, dear, why don't we all go to that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course. Before I could grasp what was happening, Judy, Bob, Nathan, and Victoria were heading out the door. Bob didn't even look back at me as they left. The remaining guests, feeling the shift in the atmosphere, soon made their excuses and departed, leaving only my parents behind. They offered to help clean up, but I insisted they rest too. Finally, by myself, I collapsed onto the sofa, letting the tears come unchecked. Time slipped by while I cried, my hand lying gently on my swollen belly, lost in thoughts about how my life had come to this. Dawn was approaching. 5 days after my emergency C-section, I felt an unexpected surge of strength, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were impressed with my progress and gave me the go-ahead to leave the hospital. During this time, Bob hadn't called once since he'd left for San Diego. He hadn't asked about my well-being or inquired about his newborn son. It was clear to me then that our marriage had reached its end. I reached out to my parents, asking if the boys and I could stay with them temporarily. They immediately agreed and supported my decision. While staying with them, I had the chance to rest and recuperate as they doted on my sons. I began to research divorce lawyers and started gathering all necessary financial documents. A week after leaving the hospital, Bob finally called. I ignored the first 3 calls, letting them go to voicemail before answering the third. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" Bob demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Taking a deep breath, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I've filed for divorce." There was a stunned silence, then he laughed derisively. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you?" "What you've done?" I retorted, feeling a rush of anger. "You mean like abandoning me right before I gave birth? Or draining our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back, no problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Do you know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He ranted about how Nathan's new wife had offered him a position at the bank, about their plans to start a financial company, and how they were going to become incredibly wealthy. "You never believed in me, Diana. You always shot down my ideas. Well, guess what? I'm free now, and you're just a loser who can't recognize potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Bob didn't contest anything, returned the money he had taken, and agreed to pay alimony. When it came to the house, I had years of mortgage payments logged that proved I had been the main contributor. The judge awarded me the house without hesitation. The day I moved back into what was now my house with the boys, Bob was there, packing up his last belongings. As I entered, holding the baby and with our toddler by my hand, he sneered, "Enjoy this dump while you can. I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed." He left, and with his departure, I felt a tremendous relief. The house felt more spacious and brighter. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new routine. I had returned to work and found a balance between my career and motherhood. Though it wasn't always easy, my boys and I were happy, healthy, and thriving. One ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my jaw drop. The headline read, "Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins." The article detailed a shocking scandal. Victoria, Nathan's wife, had been orchestrating an elaborate con. She had convinced Bob, Nathan, and Judy to invest heavily in a non-existent financial company, leading them to mortgage Judy's house and drain all their savings into this phantom venture. Victoria had never actually been a banker. The office she showed them was just a short-term rental, a mere stage for her complex fraud. She vanished with millions,
leaving behind nothing but counterfeit documents and shattered dreams. To make things even worse, it turned out that an extra loan had been taken to cover Nathan and Victoria's extravagant wedding in San Diego, the same event that had caused Bob to leave us. As I continued reading, a whirlwind of emotions hit me. Shock, confusion, and I must admit a hint of satisfaction. The aftermath was devastating. Unable to repay the debts, they lost everything. Their home, cars, and even personal possessions, all taken by creditors. Now penniless, I heard from others that Judy had resorted to a cashier job just to scrape by enough for a small apartment and basic groceries. Bob and Nathan were in similar dire straits, their dreams of affluence ruined.
I felt a deep sense of relief that I had divorced Bob when I did, sparing my children and myself from the financial ruin that engulfed my former in-laws. Just when I thought I had moved past all this, Judy's number appeared on my phone. Against my better judgment, I answered. Judy's voice was weak, a stark contrast to her usual commanding presence. "We need your help," she began, pleading for a place to stay. "The children need their father and grandmother," she urged, emphasizing the importance of family in these hard times. I took a deep breath, flooded with memories of past betrayals and hardships, Thanksgiving alone, being abandoned before giving birth, the repeated insults. "Family?" I echoed, my voice firm. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in peril. You weren't worried about family when you drained my savings or when you called me a loser." Judy tried to interject, but I stopped her. "I'm sorry for your troubles, Judy, but the choices made by you, Bob, and Nathan are not my burden. My children are my priority, and I refuse to let your chaos disrupt our lives. Please don't contact us again." I hung up and blocked her number, feeling a significant weight lift from my shoulders. It was over, once and for all.